History Pub is the Cottage Grove Historical Society, one of the partners in history. You can find them on CG History, and we believe it's .org, but if you just do some Google searching, you'll come there. They, every third Saturday at the Shepherd Room Community Center on Gibbs, they have a talk, and this time it's going to be on Slabtown, the old downtown of Cottage Grove that lined the river and out Wall Street, and you're in Limati now, and that was kind of the low-life, swampy, cheap land, nobody wanted to be here kind of place. Until they got the railroad over here. But anyway, I digress. If you're here to hear about the country fair, I think you're in the right place. I'm Dana Mary Day. I'm again speaking on behalf of the Cottage Grove Historical Society, of which I'm a happy member. I had heard about the country fair long before I ever got there. I was hitchhiking around somebody and they were saying, yeah, there's this really cool thing and they've got this sauna, and it sounded like a lot of fun. And then I went to some rainbow gatherings and would see people leave right up after the 4th of July prayer and head out, and they were going to the country fair. And I also was connected with the Renaissance Fair, and as you will find out, there's a deep connection between both Rainbow and Country Fair. So, 1969, very special year. I was a kid looking forward to seeing Man on the Moon, been seeing it in my weekly reader all my life. That happened, Woodstock, Stonewall riots, and the Oregon Country Fair, except it wasn't called the Oregon Country Fair. It was called something else. So here I am, first appearance at the Oregon Country Fair, 1992. Had on my Renaissance costume, came up, finally got here, was hanging out in front of the Dragon Gate, and I do what I always do, go up. If you're in a jester costume, you can go up and start talking to people and engaging. So I'm talking to these guys and I go, do you mind if we take your picture? And turned out they were from the RG Register Guard. So first appearance, I end up in the paper, Face of the Country Fair. So anyway, I have, these are what helped form the fair, the Renaissance Fair in California, the hippie ethos that was happening, the 60s, which mostly happened in the 70s, but a lot of the unique stuff going on in Eugene. Vietnam was happening. There was a lot of protests at U of O. Rainbow gatherings had been happening. And so lots of neat stuff. Here's some advice I've learned about the country fair. Nobody is bigger than the fair. Some people think it can't happen without them, and they usually kind of burn out. And don't let it eat you, because the fair will continue whether you're there or not. So just, and then there's a bunch of, there's fiefdoms, there's Ken Kesey says if you're going to go out there, you're going to kiss a lot of hippie. Get ready to do that. Fair politics, but in spite of it all, there's a lot of magic, psycho-spiritual rejuvenation. All right, so why are we having a history pub? That's a bit of a stretch to talk about the country fair. No, it's not. We've got a lot of Cottage Grove connections. I mean, look at me. You're having to deal with me as a city councilor, and I'm here because of the country fair. Gil Harrison was a very early key player in the Renaissance Fair, started at the very beginning with it. He was a local potter. He's passed away now. Another great potter is Charlie Tilden, and he had a big truck, so he ended up there and was on the garbage crew, and I did say garbage, no recycling, it was garbage crew. Hal Hartzell, Jerry Rust, Ed Wimple, all people that settled here up at Cougar Mountain and had a lot of influence. Hodad's got Jerry Rust elected as county commissioner, and he has a close affinity with Cottage Grove. There's even a Rust in the house. There's Michelle Rose, that is a local business person that has made her living at the country fair as well. And Peter, I don't think you're in the Navy shot, but I did find a Navy shot. Navy Reserve. Naval Reserve. So Eugene in the 60s was, I mean, I can't say I wasn't here, but I was in a college town in the same time period. I was very aware of what was going on. I was just a little too young to be a real hippie, but still was immersed in this milieu. And so here's all what we got going on. Anti-war was here long before. It was like an early bastion. There was a group called EPIC, the Eugene Peace Information Center. Senator Wayne Moore's Kent State had just happened. There was these gathering places, the World Coffee House and the Odyssey. Ken Kesey had moved back. He'd been served his time, moved back to Pleasant Hill, so he was around. There was all this environmental stuff going on. The Bay Area scene had moved up to Marin County in Northern California. And so why did the hippies all move to Eugene? Heard there was no work. Well, that was more true in the 80s and the 90s. But anyway, so there was this magic thing going on, magic milieu that was happening in Eugene. And meanwhile, in the early 60s, down in California, there was this couple, Ron and Phyllis Patterson. She was a school teacher who refused to sign the loyalty oath for the McCarthy thing. And so she became a drama teacher with groups. And anyway, she was doing drama with kids, and the Commedia dell'arte was very popular with the kids. So they decided to do a benefit for a radio station, it's not KPFA, but it's one of the affiliates of the Pacifica Corporation. So 1963, they have this Renaissance Fair. Here's Phyllis, Ron, and Judy Corey. I was lucky to meet all of them and learn a lot from them. 1968, 67, they had a northern branch. They had a southern branch down at Agoura. The northern branch was at Novato, Black Oak Forest. Was there for 30 years and just wore in, and it was completely magical. Very similar to the country fair. There was a nighttime scene afterwards where they had parties, but the difference was there was a very strict costume code, and you took classes how to speak and learned the history, and it was a whole different thing. Similar amount of effort to set it up, but instead of one weekend like the country fair, this would go for 6 to 8 weekends. So it was quite a scene, and still happening today. So somebody that had gone to the Marin Fair, Ron and Robin Ulrich, they were at this small school called the Children's House, and it was based on Summerhill. This English educator just said, let kids do whatever they want. If they want to break a window, let them break a window, and then they'll have to deal with fixing it, and they'll learn from that. So it was very permissive, let kids be free and learn. So this school was modeled after that, and Ron and Robin says, hey, there's this great Renaissance fair we go to, why don't we recreate that? And one of the teachers, Robin Milich, lived on a farm west of Eugene on Hawkins Lane, and it was perfect. It had an old barn and a bunch of fallen down sheds and everything. They went in and used all the scrap wood, and they created a village. And here's the entrance. This is an old scrap piece of plywood that has the map of the site on it. It's really great. And it was perfect weather. It just flowed in. About 2,000 people showed up. Some people made food. Other people sold crafts. Here's just some scenes. They encouraged people to dress up. Musicians wandered around. This guy on the right, that's Barry Plucker Adams. He's one of the guys at the Rainbow Gathering, and his path is rather in Vietnam, as in the Army. Then he came back, had a vision of creating world peace. So he was at the Vortex Festival, so the Legion was coming to Portland, and somebody said to Tom McCall, let's get all the hippies out of town, let's give a free music. And he said, Tom McCall he wasn't the most brilliant guy, but when he heard a good idea, he made it happen. And so they made it happen, and Barry and his friend in the Rainbow was a big part of that. And he was a very big part of setting up these early Renaissance fairs. And there he is again in older age. He's still kicking, and that's called a dutar. It's a one-string thing, and he goes around and plunks. That's why he's plunker. So I want to talk about the crafting ethos. During the 60s, or the countercultural movement, there was a desire to not work for the man, to drop out. So there was a lot of people doing the back to the land, moving into communes, a lot of do-it-yourself, making leather work, tie-dyes, macrame, candles were very popular. And people that lived in school buses, crafting was a perfect vehicle because you could work where you were living there. You could work and take your craft to fairs or barter festivals, and as you would travel, you would sell your wares, and it gave a perfect way to do that. So some of the crafters that saw the success of this wanted to get together and form a crafting guild to do a year-round crafting sales. The EPIC, the Eugene Peace Information Center, had done a holiday crafts fair, and so they approached the owners of the Odyssey, the Wootons, and that's how they got involved. They had a whole floor they weren't using, so the crafters got together and said, okay, we'll have EPIC had been having a holiday market since '62, a holiday craft market, and so we'll say, well, we'll just try to make this all year, happen every weekend. And so this group, they did it, and they moved to another store, and then they started dealing with the city, trying to get permission to do it outside. And this is what became the Eugene Saturday Market. So a lot of the crafters and the vendors do both. They do the country fair and they do the Saturday market. Of course, the city of Eugene, they weren't too happy about, the business people weren't. We don't want a bunch of dirty hippies not paying taxes cluming up downtown. So a lot of back and forth. They gave a trial, a place in front of the park over, or it was a park structure, the park. Yeah, well, it's over there, but it was called the Park Over or something. Over Park, that's it. Anyway, so the first Renaissance fair was so beautiful, a lot of the people said, well, let's do it again. So they'd had one in the fall, let's have one in the spring or the early summer. So second Renaissance fair, they found a piece of property they could rent out Crow Road, unimproved as is. They had to put in a culvert. It had a single entrance in and out, and they met at the New World Coffee House and everybody agreed to show up, and so they did it, and it was too successful. All these people showed up, and there was one way in, one way out, and people got stuck, and people were parking along the highway, and traffic backed up, and nobody really was prepared for this onslaught of people, so it was a bit chaotic. But the beauty of it was a lot of people goes, oh, well, we need somebody directing traffic. That'll be me. I'll just help direct traffic. And right next to the naked guy that's directing traffic. And so anyway, they managed to pull it off. And one of the people that was there was Bill Wooten, and other names. Robin Richardson was the teacher that had the farm, but she divorced, so that's her. Connie Epstein was at the first one. She worked at the World Coffee House. This was a very interesting mix. Bikers showed up, locals, loggers, hippies. Everybody was just checking everybody out. A lot of people had come from communes. They'd heard about, hey, you can sell your crafts here, and so they showed up. But again, too many people, not enough organization. Bill Wooten started directing traffic, and that's where he was working info table, but then he spent the whole time dealing with traffic. And so he saw the potential. His partner Cindy was selling crafts, and she also saw the potential. So they made 2 loops, just sprayed hay around in the field, so people followed one loop and then they followed another loop. Does that sound familiar? The country fair is just one big loop, infinite 8. So here are the Wootons, completely opposites. He was older considerably than her. They had both come to Oregon for school and got disillusioned. Bill was at U of O, and Cindy was down at Medford, and they both had a lot of ideas, and Bill was a very argumentative type of person, and he didn't get along with the people in the department, so he got a job with the employment office, and that's where he met Cindy, and they decided they were instant soulmates, got married within 2 weeks, I think, or 2 months, and he caused so much trouble down there that they moved him up to Eugene. I think you'll be a better fit up there. And so they opened a coffee house called the Odyssey. It was owned with Willamette. That's Bill's table. He would always maintain a scene, and they sold soup and coffee and sandwiches and snacks, and it was just kind of it was a gathering place. All these people show up. They would have late night discussions after it was closed. They might talk all night, gathered around the table. A lot of intersections there. So when at the end of the life of the Odyssey ended in 72, that's when urban renewal said, okay, we're taking this building and knocking it down. So up until that point, it was just secondhand tables, and they had all kind of things. They had that beginning of the Saturday market happened there, and they had a community Thanksgiving dinner there that's still going on in the Whitaker now. And anyway, planning for the 3rd Renaissance Fair happened at the Odyssey. And Bill was kind of a take charge sort of guy. He was very visionary. He had a lot of great ideas. Was very sloppy on the details. That's where Cindy came in. She was detail-oriented and really could figure stuff out. So the 3rd one, this was the first one that happened at the current site. The Crow Road was said, no, that didn't work out. So friends of Connie Epstein says, hey, we live out on this land out in Eugene, out in Veneta. You ought to come check it out. And they all went out there and said, yeah, this will be perfect. So there's Connie. So they went out and walked around, and there was this cow path that followed along the river, and then it kind of looped back. It's made what they call a 6. It wasn't an 8. But the fair was small enough they could fit everything that they had along this path. And the Rainbow people were out there beating down grass. Plunker gathered up some homeless people he found to go out and just said, if we'll feed them, you'll work, right? And they said, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll do that. And so anyway, they kind of put it together. And it was a 400-acre site, raw land. Everything had to be brought in. There was no infrastructure. And since they were ridding the land, that meant everything had to come out at the end. One of the guys, this is Michael Kilgallen. He was with one of the early people there, Reese, I believe, was Reese Prody, and he had a truck, and so he got pressed into service, and once he got out there, he goes, hey, you hippies, you can't build a bridge with 2x4s. So anyway, he got involved and got invested and decided this is something he really would like to do. Another person that showed up through the Rainbow Gathering was Reggie DeSoto. He said, I'll handle parking, and he was also a Vietnam vet. And so there was these animals running around the property, so they had to corral them up, and one of them was a horse, so he got on the horse, and that's how he directed traffic. And he would, he could be up there and see it, and, okay, follow me, and he got bikers to volunteer, and they would say, follow that biker, and they would. Anyway, so it all, people rose to the occasion, and it went really well. So at this time of the existence, they would have 2 fairs a year, one in the fall, one in the summer, early summer. They did run into rain often, so that became a theme, which is one of the reasons the date eventually ended up to be the 2nd weekend in July. They had home brewers made a big beer garden, and they were selling beer. And the bikers would show up, and there was this ethos of like, everybody's welcome. Let's work together. Let's be together. The bikers showed up with Grateful Dead shows. Anyway, the local gypsy souls came rumbling in, and they demanded to be let in. And they didn't want to, there was a standoff, you know. We don't want to roll over too easy, but we don't want to just say, sure, do whatever you want. So they said, well, if you promise to behave, we'll let you in, and we won't make you pay. And so they had their own camp and all, but they got pretty lit at the beer garden, and so they decided maybe public beer sales wasn't the best idea. Rain came, so a lot of vehicles got stuck because this is all floodplain, low floodplain area, and it's all silt. So if you get wet, you're gonna sink. So here's just some shots of that one. The second one at the Long Tom. Already a group of people started coalescing as leaders. They would come out early. They became main camp. John Sundquist on the far left. There's John Pincus, Sandra Bauer, Nancy Albro, Ron Chase. These are all people and there's Michael Kilgallen, still hanging around. So anyway, these are the people that made things happen. They would come out early. They became coordinators. It was non-hierarchical. Nobody was really in charge. Everything had to be decided through consensus, which is not the easiest way to make a decision. But it worked because it was still small enough, and it worked pretty well. However, one of the issues was Highway 26 doesn't go the way it does now. When it hit Territorial Highway, it went north to Elmira and then jogged down what is now Subtle Road. And that's where all the traffic went, and that was a residential area. So at fair time, there was all this traffic, and then people would start, leaving trash or camping out in people's driveways. And so it got people's attention. One of the people that got their attention was Lane County Commission, because they got so many complaints that they passed an ordinance that said in June of '71, requiring a county permit for gatherings more than 1,500 people for more than 4 hours in unincorporated, unimproved areas. Sound like any event you know? So the fair already felt targeted already early on. They said it was because they heard rumors of a big rock concert coming to Florence, but I kind of have other ideas. Well, they were still going, but this time this is the 5th fair, and it's still called a Renaissance fair, and they still were trying to do kind of Renaissance-y sort of stuff, but it was already getting its own flavor. 75 cents, they expanded the 6 on into an 8 because more vendors were showing up. They used CB radios for the first communication. There was a hand-drawn map. They had a fire crew through the Hodads. Both Senator Morse and Ken Kesey were speakers. And there was a big learning curve of people we learned from our mistakes, we won't do that again, so anyway. So still very low key. One of the provisions the county demanded, they said anybody staying overnight needs a camping pass. So that was the beginning of issued camping passes. And in the beginning they were paper, not fancy like this one, but very simple, something like that. And there was a button booth that says, hey, because it's hard to lose, it's easy to lose a paper pass, and especially if you're camping. So we make a button out of it, and you wore it. And here's the complete evolution. You have an old camping pass made into a button. You got the wristbands, and you've got the photo ID. So those are all options to get branded. So I'm still wearing my little wristband. I love the wristband. You just strap it on. I don't have to worry about it. It's done. And it's nice cloth. The first ones were plastic. You go in the sauna, and it would shrink wrap you. So there's passes. Why do they call them passes? Because you can pass them. Pass. Your shirt was a pass. If you got a shirt, that was your pass. And so you wear your shirt, you can walk anywhere in the fair. I didn't get a shirt the first year I worked. I got a paper pass. And so, but people would gather up the paper passes or gather up shirts or both, go out and give those all to their friends. They would walk in, then they would gather them up, take them back out, and get, anyway, the pass. So eventually they figured it out and kind of shut down on that. But it had certain panache to say you snuck in the fair. In fact, for years, all the board members running would say, well, my first fair, I snuck in it, you know. It's kind of like if you came over on the convict ship, you're famous in Australia. All right, a sixth fair. This was the only 4-day fair, and I think they didn't have a fall one. Let me see. No, they had a fall one. Sorry, but one they didn't have. Anyway, they had a 4-day fair, and it got really hot, and people started shucking clothes, and that was just another problem that the neighbors didn't like. Dirty, hippies, traffic, nuisance. So that freaked out the main camp people, and so they said, you had to put a sock on it there, bud. Yeah, that's right. There was a fall fair, then this would be the summer fair, right? Yes. And then right after that, just after the town got settled down, after the the Renaissance fair, the Grateful Dead played out on the same parking lot that they had the country fair. And they call it, to this day, the Dead Lot, where they played. So the Hodads came and built a stage along with the Rainbow family's help. Chuck Kesey had wanted to do it to benefit his business, the Springfield Creamery. And so naturally, his brother knew the Dead, and so through that, he went and talked to Jerry, and Jerry says, sure, we'll do that. And so they came up. They didn't know anything about doing a rock concert. These are literally their yogurt labels that they printed to make the tickets. They recruited all the fair volunteers to man security, and as soon as they started playing, they all left their post and went in. So they took a beating. They took a beating financially, but the Grateful Dead were they just said, here's $10,000, will that help the creamery? So they saved the creamery. But you can see traffic, they built all this thing. It was very hot. They sprayed water. There they are. You can see the set list in one of those books. That really planted some blowback for the fair because they had this mass influx, 20,000 people. They were everywhere after the concert. And people had just gotten over the country fair, so seeds were planted. So Hodads, let's talk Hodads. They showed up fairly early, just as like they were out to recruit more Hodads. They were a tree planting collective. There's Hal, Jerry, Ed Wimple, and Jerry Mackey. And John Sundquist had already become involved. I didn't have his picture, but he saw him earlier in the main camp crew. They were all Hodads. They were out in the 72 fair to recruit more workers, and they suddenly got pressed into kind of, hey, can you come deal with the bikers? You know? And these are all burly tree planters. So when they walked up, the bikers were like, oh, these aren't hippies, are they? So anyway, so they got them to cool stuff down. Jerry says, yeah, go ahead. You want to hit something? Hit this. And they were all like, I don't know about that. They look pretty solid. So anyway, the next year they became official security. After 72, they were official security. But the fair was between the work involved with the Dead show, they didn't do a fall fair that year. Plus, they wanted to let Veneta cool down because there were plenty of people pissed about the Dead show. And when they did attempt to talk to the neighbors, they kept complaining about the Dead show, and they go, yeah, but that wasn't us. That was the Dead show. That wasn't us, but still. One and the same. This is the main area. They got to go on, but they had a lot of talking to do to satisfy the county. Crafts details, about 1,000 something. anyway, the maps, they made maps, but they were destroyed at the end of each fair because they didn't want the info falling in Big Brother's hands. So, people were paranoid. Very non-hierarchical. Bus to the fair was the first year. They urged people to leave dogs at home, only park where it's legal. Don't endanger the fair was already starting to come out. Some nut called in a bomb threat. I'm going to blow up them here dirty hippies. And the sheriff, they had to work with the sheriff as part of the county permit. And the sheriff wanted just to clear everybody out, drive through with the squad cars, everybody leave. And Bill says, no, we'll handle it. They just pass the word quietly, be cool, there may be a bomb. Like, man. And so that pissed the sheriff off, and that'll come back to bite us again. So when the 8th fair, when they went to get the permit, over 30 locals show up to the permit hearing to protest. The sheriff was mad about the bomb scare response. They required 2 extra deputies and posting a $15,000 bond. That pushed the fair all the way up. By the time they got everything done, it pushed it into September, later than planned. They first, the year of the 3-barrel recycling, compost, recyclables, and trash. So Bring had already started to work with them. As first, I completely forgot to mention Whitebird. Whitebird was that second one. They showed up with a couple of bags of first aid equipment, and they were at the first fair and have been to every one since. I really spaced on Whitebird. We had 245 booths at that one. It was the first time for Major Chumley, or the flaming zucchini, as he was known there. He was a fire swallower and was quite an energetic guy, and he was an immediate hit there. And Toby Alves sold toasted nuts. She later became Toby's of Toby Tofu. And they had some SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism, some real-time Renaissance-y stuff. At the end of the fair, they had a big legal surprise. They got a letter from a lawyer representing the Renaissance pleasure fairs in California, and they said, hey, we own the term Renaissance Fair. You can't use it. So the fair goes, uh-oh, what are we going to do? And they kind of figured there's no way we can win that one, and plus we don't have any money or any attorneys or anything else. So, all right, we'll change our name. So here's the California Fair. You can see they have a point, right? Hey, you're copying us. We have a copyright. So anyway, they said they were kicking around ideas, and the word country and the word Oregon, so the idea of Oregon and country kept bubbling up. So in the end, they decided to call it the Oregon Country Renaissance Fair for 1 year only. So this is the transition year. And it was transitional in many ways. The peach appeared. So this, somebody found an image from a Japanese, what is I going to call it? A 1913 woodcut of a Japanese family crest. That's what it said in the reference that I found. And while working with the silk screen, there was some deterioration around the edges, and they liked it so much that now that's a part of the official design. So anyway, that's appeared on every single poster since, the peach in some form, and it's the de facto symbol of the fair. And it's on passes and stuff and everything. They won't let you use it in your crafts. You have to get permission to reproduce the peach. So you can if it doesn't look exactly like that, you can get away with it. But if you use the peach, you have to get approval. $1.75 admission. Chumley came back with all his friends. He had a whole year to recruit people. He goes, this is great. We'll have a circus. He got a marching band together. And they showed up and created a stage. They called it Chumley Land. And one of the people they had were the Karamazov brothers, Flying Karamazovs. They're world-renowned jugglers and entertainers. And they have also Renaissance roots. They appeared at the Renaissance fairs in California. And so they all showed up here because Chumley got them, and they put together a show, and they had people marching band marching around the fair. So here we see him. There's Reverend Chumley. He wasn't being called Reverend Chumley. He was still the flaming zucchini, getting ready to do fire breathing. Here's their band, all 6 people, mostly from Santa Cruz or what's the green something in Washington? Green? Anyway, Evergreen. I think these are mostly from Evergreen. And a guy wrote a song, the Chumley Land song, just for it, and it's still being played. And there's the Karamazovs juggling. All right, I love Chumley. Chumley is the bomb. Again, known as Flaming Zucchini, Major Chumley, and eventually Reverend Chumley. He still is a prankster, a performer. He gave up flamethrowing because he also created the midnight show. He said, okay, all the people that were stuck in the booths, let's do a special show for them. And did he ask permission? Of course not. He's Chumley. So he just got a torchlit procession, got the band, they marched down, people followed them, they appeared at the main stage and did a show with flashlights and torches and candles. And it's been a tradition ever since. But I saw him one time, he was walking around, he had this big long overcoat, and there was a letter from the board of directors stabbed to his back with a knife. And he was walking around talking to people. He was always an in-your-face kind of guy. When we went to the drug-free fair, he had these holographic glasses, and he was saying, like, I've been 17 hours, 36 minutes, and 52 seconds drug-free with the holographic glasses. And his whole material was taking the piss out of the drug-free. And he goes, 10,000 dyslexic drug users showed up at the fair for the free drugs. And anyway, he's just a great guy, but eventually butted heads too much with the fair. I saw him do a unicycle straitjacket escape on Daredevil stage. That was pretty impressive. Sign crew, when I first got there at night, they would feed you if you were working, and there was always signs out that they say, yeah, paint a sign if you don't mind. So people were painting signs. This is the 10th fair, and this is the first time it's known officially as the Oregon Country Fair. Chumley was missing in action, so the Karamazovs kind of took over, and that eventually caused a split. For a while, he was happy to be a figurehead and just show up and take credit or do stuff, whatever. But he did all kinds of crazy things. They had the alternative technology area where they showed the solar stuff and everything. That eventually became Community Village. And then out of that, we also got Energy Park later down the road. More, again, trouble with the fair neighbors. Admission, $1.75, 50-cent discount for riding the bus. This is the 11th fair. The Wootens had always have a volatile relationship, and it really had gone to it was really like head to head at this point. They couldn't agree on anything, and the meetings were being disrupted by their getting into shouting matches. So they eventually divorced. Bill said, okay, he immediately remarried and had this new partner, and he tried to keep Cindy at the distance away. She showed up and did some stuff like registration and made a lot of lists saying, here's what all needs to be done, because Bill was not a details person. And so a lot of stuff fell by the cracks, particularly things that involved contracts, like for hay, for toilets, for supplies. So it was kind of a bad year. And at this point, thank goodness, a savior emerges. Jill Hyman was friends with both Cindy Wooten and Sandra Bauer, who were key main camp people, and so she showed up at this time, and she happened to be an attorney. So I'm gonna tell a lot more about her later. $2.50 to get in and 50% off, 18,000 revelers. But a lot of people at main camp kind of circled the wagons and got through this very tumultuous year. His first year as the community village, or as my friend likes to call it, the commie village. '79, this was where it was really tough with the county. They kept ratcheting up all the complaints, were making it really hard. They required to hire extra deputies, and even the sheriff had to point out that, hey, you know, we spend $6,000 of county time at the Rhododendron Festival. We don't make them post a bond. So Jill was battling that $30,000 bond and got a last-minute bond waiver. So the fair got into gear at the last minute. But every year was that way. It was something always, well, what are we going to do to make the fair happen this year? Always some hurdle. So this time the county went a little too far. So they demanded more money. They wanted deputies on the paths. They wanted extra traffic patrols. Jerry Rust had been elected county commissioner by that time and said the sheriff was seeking a gravy train. Ticket prices had to go up to pay for the additional cost. Jill Hyman had already said, okay, you know, she had recognized a lot needs to happen, but she said, we're going to fight this on First Amendment rights. And everybody says, no, you can't do that. I mean, they can't fight City Hall. Well, the problem was mostly was NIMBYs, people that had bought, the land had been selling off lots, and the high ground, along the high ground, they didn't sell off the swampland where we met or used it, but they had sold off all these lots, and the people bought it not realizing they bought a front row seat to a big music festival and craft festival and lots of traffic and nuisance. So they were all up in arms. Damaged, you know, people's fences getting torn down for people trying to sneak in, people parking and camping illegally, all that kind of stuff. So Jill fought them. She says, you're singling the fair out and you're preventing our freedom of assembly. So she fought them, had filed an injunction, and also sued them for damages. Now, during the fair, all these extra sheriff deputies that we were paying for decided, okay, we're going to do a lot of frivolous ticketing. Oh, your taillight's out. Can I see your registration? Cracked headlight. You know, they backed up traffic all the way to Eugene by doing that. So the people we hired and were paying for to facilitate parking had infringed on our right to gather. And Jill, being a smart attorney, says, I've got a good case. So she got the bond lifted at the last minute, and she kept that lawsuit in place. So we got Energy Park for this year, 1981. Things are really getting organized. Focus on finding a permanent home. They said, well, we got to do this, we really got to have somewhere where we can stay, because all this packing up at the end and moving out. They tightened up on the sweep, and that's when the HODAD said, okay, we're quitting. We're not going to do this anymore. Because they would be kind of liberal and like, oh, well, if it's a friend or you look cool or whatever, they wouldn't really worry about, and they wouldn't search all the booths for people hiding out. And they called them a rent-a-cop. So Peachy the Dragon, it didn't go out in the 8, but it was made for the Radar Angels. There was free bus rides this year. No, you don't have to pay anything for the bus. Well, guess what? On the fair 1982, it was started on a high note because we just bought the land. And that's a great story. The sheriff actually contributed, or Lane County contributed the down payment, part of the down payment. Because by the time Jill's lawsuit got to before the judge, they were like, even their own attorney was like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys, you know. They went against the advice of their own attorney. Sound familiar, Manager Sauerwein? So they gave us the money. So to celebrate the Fighting Instruments of Karma, the band, which had grown considerably since those 6, performed mostly in the nude in a free-spirited march around the 8. We own it. And right after that fair, There was the second decade in the second 10-year field trip. So the Grateful Dead came back. They were trying to work it out with the Keeseys, figure out what to do, and they eventually just said, tell you what, you guys deal with the concert, we'll rent you the land and provide the volunteers. And it worked out really well that way. They could deal with their brother, Ken Kesey, and the Grateful Dead and all that. And we just have to deal with the parking lot. Again, Hodads and Rainbows showed up to help with stages. It was held again on the Dead lot. And good time was had by all. They didn't play as long as some people thought, so the staffing and all didn't work out again. It's what happens when you get a bunch of volunteer hippies to try to do anything. So the fair got $25,000. The whole payment, the whole down payment was $100,000. We had saved up, I think, $25,000 roughly. We got the settlement for Lane County, $19,000. There was the charter membership. People could lend the fair or give the fair $300, and they got a certificate saying they were a charter member. That's the only thing they could get. And if the fair said, if we ever get any money, we might pay you back. And I think a lot of people just said, no, forget about it. It's my contribution. They had shirts and bake sales. And between all of that, they managed to get $100,000 and make the down payment for the land. With ownership comes headaches. A lot of, now that we own it, we're responsible for it. Now, if something goes wrong, then we've got to deal with it, and we got to make those payments. And if we lose money, if we don't get money enough by doing the country fair, we won't make the next payment. And the sheriff and all was still being jerks. So they had a lot of rain, and it turned into a mud fair. So people were scraping mud and putting down hay, and a lot of people didn't get out for a long time. So going to backtrack a little bit about finding a home. So it had been a task for a while. People were going off scouting, looking for things. Where would be a good place to have the fair? But was there parking? Was there easy access? Was there a water? There was a lot of requirements, and basically came to the conclusion that, hey, this is the best place right here. The people had an unrealistic price in the beginning. It was pretty much perfect enough, and you had this huge haul out at the end of each fair, and that would be great if we didn't have to do that, if we could just leave stuff there. So the land was owned by a group called Western Aerial Contractors. They had an airstrip there at one time, and they would fly up and do aerial photography and land. And so their land, as they got older and quit doing the aerial photography, that was their pension plan. We bought this land cheap. It's bottom land, not a lot you can do with it. We'll just sell it for our retirement fund. And so they had been selling off lots, and that's where all the NIMBYs came from. So all along Subtle Road, there was all the high ground they had basically sold off. So what was left was useless bottom land where you couldn't farm it. It never made money if you tried to hay it or anything. So it was pretty much useless land. They wanted $325,000 with $1,000 down. And the fair goes like, no way we can do that. And at the time they were in negotiations, they didn't know Lane County was going to make that nice contribution. Anyway, I compare those NIMBYs to like here, the Speedway. They buy their house when it's not the Speedway season, and then when the Speedway goes, hey, what's going on? Let's shut this down. So anyway, same kind of thing. So anyway, the land was bought. It was only down to 240 acres out of the original 400 when they first started gathering there. It's kind of like they got a pig in the poke, because after the sale closed and all, they found out, oh, guess what? ODOT's going to reroute the 126. And we're going to put it right through the fair property where that orange line is. So essentially, you're going to shear off about 30 acres of the parking lot and have this useless strip. Now the reason they moved it up that way was they found in the original route, they found archaeological evidence of Native Americans. So they go, oh, well, we can't do here. So they checked some random places in this field and said, oh, well, there's nothing here, obviously. So let's just put it up there. And so the fair bought this property. Nobody had figured that out. They didn't bother telling them. The process had already gone so long, it was past time for public comment or filing a complaint or a grievance. It was ready to go. And the fair hired a couple of land use attorneys, and they started working on it. And meanwhile, the volunteers go into action. John Silvermoon had been actually trained in archaeology. Jim Guthrie and John Stamp were big aficionados of anything like that. And so they went out and started looking, doing a few core samplings, and they found a camas oven. You probably can't really see it, but it's rock-lined cairn. That's where the native peoples would roast the camas. After they harvest it, you would bake it in the stone oven. And this alluvial soil does not have stones like that. If they're there, they've been carried in from somewhere. So where all this floodplain would not have river rocks like this, that means it would have to be carried in. So when they found that camas oven, they said, aha, we've got evidence that where you're going to put the, you see how it crosses the Long Tom 3 times on their proposed route. So they found along that riverbank, they found a camas oven and other stuff in their samples. They found it. And so normally they would say, too late, we're not going to look at that. The deadline is passed. But their attorney discovered they had not done an environmental studies, impact studies. And so they just waited cool and calm till they got into the hearing, and they go, what about the environmental impact study? And they were like, we hoped you wouldn't ask about that because we haven't done it. And so the judge anyway said, well, now you're going to have to look at their stuff because you screwed up. Now the whole process has to go back to square one. So they were able to convince them that, hey, one bridge and straight along our property line's a lot better than what you're trying to do. 3 bridges, come on. And plus, we've got a lot of more rich archaeological data than where you said there was some. So ODOT has to say, okay, we'll do it. And for the fair, it was great because one of the real problems was, like I showed you on that map, the 126 went through the residential area. Now there's no houses along the fair's southern border. We'll just go right along. A new public entrance, so the people won't be going through the neighborhood. They'll just come right off 126. So it was a huge win for the fair and the beginning of better relations in Veneta. And there's the big crawler to put in the road. Fair people out checking it out. Said, man, we could have some fun with one of these. So now I want to really talk about Jill Hyman because her, more than any reason, is the reason there's still a country fair. I'm sure the fair would have never made it without her. Because again, it was non-hierarchical, consensus-based, anarchistic. Nobody wanted to be in charge. Nobody wanted to take notes. Nobody wanted to do anything legitimate. Can't we just get along? And so they had a bunch of money in the bank, and Jill says, hello, if you got all that money, you're liable for taxes. So we got to get started immediately on tax exempt status. That requires a board structure and rules and operating people. And they were like, oh, we don't want any of that. And he goes, they're going to take your money. It kind of got through eventually. Oh, if without this status, they're going to take your money. You owe taxes. So they got together, they're operating. They first filed for nonprofit status with the state of Oregon, and then she did the much more ambitious 501c3, the big federal jurisdiction. She had come right as the cusp as women were starting to enter law school. Up until this point, women were very much in the minority in law school, and she was kind of in that first wave of young women becoming law students. Up until that point, it was maybe 5 to 10% maybe of a law school class. Now it was starting to be a real option. She met a fellow law student, Gretchen Miller, and on graduation they both became partners in the first all-women law firm in Eugene. They did a lot of work for cooperatives. Yes. They used old mill worker collective law to help found communes, nonprofits, any nonprofit cooperative sort of thing. They could use those old logging laws to the advantage. She had fought the county on the bond requirements, and she was very organized. She was a very short woman, but she was a spitfire. She would come very nicely dressed, very well prepared, and it was all business with the attorneys. And if anybody showed up with her, she did the talking, and she got them. She was very impressive in court. So she got all the bonds revoked, and she got the settlement for the land trust. And here's basically why she got the settlement. This is Archie Weinstein, who's one of the commissioners. Huh? Is it Weinstein or Weinstein? Okay, well, I'd heard otherwise. That's what I would have said. But anyway, he was a notorious character, I should say. And he actually had rented the building to Bill Wooten to have the Odyssey originally. And he fought the urban renewal. He was just a curmudgeonly sort of individual. But he said, I'm not going to let anybody walk on me. But Jill's argument, there's Jill in the background, Sandra Bowers making a case for the fair. She says, you are treating the fair differently. And that's against the First Amendment. Plus all your frivolous traffic stops, that was also a damage. So she sued them for, I think, $45,000, and they settled at 19. But the reason they didn't have a case was Weinstein and the other ne'er-do-well, Rutherford, said that they didn't care if it was unconstitutional against their own attorney's advice. He said, we don't care if it's unconstitutional. We don't like the dirty hippies who attend the fair or their values and lifestyles. Dared the fair to go to court. Jill's eyes lit up. She knew she had them. Because thank you. Ironically, Weinstein always called to arrange for passes. He never missed a fair. And so he loved to go out and look down his nose at the dirty hippies. All right, so let's talk a little bit how the fair has grown. I'm not going to go anymore. The fair is basically set. We're a 501c3. They had to restructure, and Sandra Bauer agreed to be president so they could sue Lane County. They had to have an actual figurehead to have standing in court. So they restructured. Now we have a full standing organization. We own the land, and smooth sailing, except we got to work things out with the neighbors. So originally the fair was just this figure 8, or figure 6, and then the 8 was added on. And that was it. And slowly things have been added. Daredevil Stage, Community Village. Shady Grove was always the acoustic stage with, literally acoustic, no amplification whatsoever. It was an acoustic stage. No power there. Power was always a big issue. No, we don't want electricity. So that was always a thing. So in 1991, the fair was too crowded on the paths, so we made the new loop. The new loop was added, and that's where Circus Stage ended up. The old circus was here, and that became W.C. Field Stage. then the city, we did a land swap with the city of Veneta. They needed a fluent field, so instead of a golf course, we gave them some land that was inside their urban growth boundary, and they swapped it for some land that we could use for camping. So we got the far side out of it. So there's a bridge that goes across the Long Tom, and that's a big camping area called the far side, and you can get all in there from off of Territorial. This was a camping area, the Che La Mela. It was a camping area for the mud sharks, and it was really cool. I remember going back there after fair and looking at it. And they decided to open that up to give more room for people to spread out and cut down on the path density. And finally, in 2015, the Crafts Lot, where we used to live, that got absorbed into the fair as well. And I have to say it's a better use of the fair overall. I mean, even though I lost my campsite, it is a better use of the fair overall. They have the dance pavilion, they've got more food booths, they have the flow zone where you can do all kind of stuff. Che La Mela has the Yes You Canopy, juggling, they'll teach you to juggle, crafts, all kind of neat stuff. Wally's Way got added in here. Little kids always had a hard time at the fair. Kids Loop was here, it was there, it got moved around and repurposed. So now they've got a nice cool area of Wally's Way. And that's not talking about child care. Child care is an actual crew where you can drop off your kid and they'll look out for it. And at the very tippy top of the fair there's this magical place called the Ritz Sauna. And it's an ongoing art project. George is never happy with what he's got. So they're always trying to one-up yourself. So one of the traditions of the fair that I have is let's go see what they're doing at the Ritz. And it's always something incredible. So that's one of the I call it the soul of the fair, the spiritual center, because you can go in and be with all your family in the big sauna. They've got two big saunas. One is a roundhouse, kind of, and one is a longhouse. And you can go sweat with all your brethren and chant and sing songs or just be quiet. And it's an incredible experience. And come out and you're out in this courtyard up looking in trees, and they've got a fire, and it's just very magical. All this artwork everywhere. They did work carving they call it the spirit pole, but then it was decided, fair politics, that it was cultural misappropriation, so it's not been put up. So it's in storage somewhere. So we'll see whatever will happen with the story pole. The fair has been systematically buying up all those properties that got sold off from the original parcel, mainly to help neighbors. If you don't like being at the fair, well, we can help you out. We'll buy your property for a good price. And so we've added to our acreage. We now are well over 500 acres, and it keeps going out here. We bought a hayfield for more parking, out of sight. And then there was another one far out of sight, or way out of sight. And then they bought a winery, Secret House Winery. So anyway, the fair's got first right of refusal, more or less, on any property, because they say, yeah, we'll pay top dollar, we want it. And so that's been kind of like, how do we come up with paying for all that? So ticket prices are now, what, $30, $40? 60? Okay, I only paid to get into the fair once. That's the only time I ever paid. I never snuck in. Can't get that credit. I'm no good. So anyway, I've only been doing it for 30 years, so I'm not one of the real, even though I'm officially an elder, I'm not the real deal. So Paxton Hogue has been to every one but one. He missed one single fair. He's a neat guy to talk to. So here's the dead lot, these are where the dead shows were. And this is the current route of 126. So right by the main Maple Gate public entrance, that's where the dead played. Those two field trips. They were scheduled to play in '92, and I had walked on. I just showed up in my van a week ahead of time, and I was saying, "Hey, I want to work and get a pass." And they go, "Well, go talk to these people." So I go talk to some people, and then I go talk to some other people, and I eventually show up at the construction desk, and they go, "Do you guys need any help?" And they're like, "I don't know. So I got tools. It's like E.F. Hutton spoke. "You got tools?" And so they took me to, and there was no power in the fair. I had all like hand planers, hand saws, brace and bit, the whole 9 yards. And so they took me to the head of construction. He goes, "Can you run a saw?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you pull a tape?" I go, "Yeah, come with me." So we went up to the ware barn area. He showed me the reefer dock. They had one. He goes, "I need one just like that. Here's where the wood is. It's called Woodstock in Wood World." And so I got some stuff, and he showed me where the saw was, because they had power up there. Only one of the few places they had power. So he had a Skill 77. So I copied that, finished that, and then he goes, "Okay, I need a ramp for it." Built the ramp, put it up, and I go, "What's next?" He goes, "Come with me." And so anyway, so at the end of the week, they handed me a camping pass, and so I earned my way in. And then they said, "What are you doing after the fair?" And I said, "Nowhere to go." I was living in my van at the time. And they said, "Well, we'll feed you, but we need to take this all down." So I became a member in officio. I got my pass with construction, but now I was in deconstruction, commonly known as decon. And so I stayed a week after, and we took it all down, and we had a big party, and they said, "Okay, you can go. And if you want to get your pass next year through us, give me your contact info." So next year, I showed up knowing I had a pass, knowing I had a job after the fair. It's kind of a trust thing, because they give you a pass to the fair, and you could say, "All right, thank you." And at the end of the fair, you could say, "Well, something came up. I have to go." So I could have done that and called burning a bridge, and probably wouldn't have been invited back yet again. So nope, I stayed my time, and so every year that's how I do my thing. I still get my pass that way. Then at the end, they say, "Well, don't. We're not." At the end of the fair, they say, "Well, don't take this down because the dead's coming back." 92. "Don't take that down because the dead's coming back. We'll leave this up because the dead's coming." And I said, "Okay." So it cut down on our workload considerably. And so at the end, when I left, and I heard that Jerry got stung by a jellyfish or something. Anyway, he was not able to play for the third decadal field trip, so that didn't happen. And I guess a bunch of people lost money. But anyway, if you don't have Jerry, you don't have a show. So anyway, this is kind of the fiefdom of the fair. A few of these parcels have filled in. Doug's Green was added, and there's the far side there. The Strickland chicken farm, when I first showed up, it was an active chicken farm, and the smell would knock you down from those barns. And everybody, entertainers camped up there, and they go, "Oh, we're so high and mighty, we're camping up in the chicken area." And I was like, "Man, we're going to park down in the craft lot where it's nice and you can breathe." But anyway, they thought they were really cool up by that chicken farm, and eventually it closed, and the fair helped the former caretaker, Andy Strickland. So it was Strickland's chicken farm, but Andy Strickland, no relation, bought it, and it's now the Art Barn complex. And he's an incredibly talented person, and he has quite a scene up there. So Friend of the Fair owns that, the old chicken farm. So how to get along in Veneta, that's been the life story of the fair and the biggest problem. So again, they didn't object to the fair itself. It was just all the nuisance that went along with it. People that would, again, trespass, leave trash, camp illegally, all the extra traffic. The traffic was mostly solved by the 126 entrance. That mostly solved the traffic. They still have to deal with all the volunteers, and the staff still go in the subtle way and down Arrow Road. That's still called Arrow from the Aeronautical Corporation. But they, early on, they organized a neighborhood response team. They would go around and say, here's my pager number to date it. Here's my pager number. If anything happens, call me, and we'll be right over. And they put signs up, nice hand-painted signs saying, respect our neighbors. See this little fair ethos? Don't jeopardize the fair. So the message was always, come on, guys, we got to do better. So anyway, the neighborhood response team started doing things. When we got our first general manager, it's actually second, paid, Arna Shaw was for a while, but Leslie really was the bomb. She was an organizational powerhouse, and she worked very closely with the city of Veneta to get doing the land swap, and also Zumwalt Park on Fern Ridge Reservoir. She goes, why don't we do a camping area? Since there's all these people showing up, why don't we do a camping area? You can manage it, do a fundraiser, charge people, whatever to do, but then you won't have people trying to camp everywhere. They can be camping in a camping area. And so that worked out really well. And then she says, hey, all these other people that want to rent their property, why don't we just do a camping permit for everybody while we're doing it for one? And then Joe Blow has a hay field. He can mow it, leave his hay bales in place for people to sit on. He can rent out that hay field for 4 or 5 times what you could get for the hay. And so people are like, hey, well, this is pretty good, you know. And they also did something very smart, too. They came up with the Jill Hyman Fund. She died tragically in childbirth, but to memorialize her, they go, you get one of the kickdowns you get are food vouchers. You get these little $3 certificates you can take to a booth, or $5, whatever. And if you donate those, the fair will pay that and match it, and that will go into the Jill Hyman Fund. And they literally bought into the community. Donate to the libraries, to the local schools. Andy took in the big kaleidoscope that was out at the fair and put it in the library, and they were at first like, I'm not sure, it takes up a lot of space. And then when he came to pick it up for the fair, they go, what, you're taking it away? People love it. Because I'll bring it back after the fair. But anyway, they literally bought into the community. So by mitigating the issues and allowing locals to benefit directly by renting their property for camping, and all the businesses, every store that sells ice, food, anything, beer, whatever, it's completely, it's like the cash registers go ka-ching, ka-ching when the country fair comes. And they were buying all their hardware locally, the fair, when they had a hardware store in Veneta. Another big change in the fair was, as I mentioned, Reverend Chumley said, the drug-free fair. A lot of people were showing up to the country fair site with not an intention of even going in. They were there to party. And they didn't care if they went in the fair or not. They would hang out in the parking lot, get good and lit. They might sling a few drugs, whatever they could do to get by. If somebody gave them a ticket, they would go in, or if they didn't, oh well, it was a whole scene. And even though beer wasn't sold in the fair, if you brought it in, nobody cared. One of the iconic images I remember, one of those moments that seared into your memory somehow at some point, it was this old drunk logger, had the whole 9 yards, the suspenders, the everything, and he was like kind of listing, and he had his little 6-pack. He was down to the last beer in his 6-pack rack, but he had it hooked in, and he had the biggest, happiest grin on his face. He was just like, this is great, you know. He just couldn't, anywhere he looked, it was just incredible. There was color and everything. And he just, he wasn't that drunk, I don't think. He was just mellow, but he was just, this is great. Oh, there went a topless girl. Wow. It's just, it was magical. And then, that was one of those moments that you remember always. But anyway, the scene in the parking lot had gotten bad, and then they had spilled over into the town and damaged was it the Dairy Queen anyway, somebody caused problems in the parking lot, and so the fair said, okay, we got to deal with this. The scene's getting too out of hand. So also in the mix, they got a letter from the DA. What is this time? 1996. What was the saying? Just say no? Right, anyway, so the fair got a letter from the district attorney saying, well, you're not enforcing drug laws or sales. You're letting drug sales happen, drug use happen. You're not doing anything about it. You're not letting us into your property anymore, because since we owned it, we could say it's a private event. We have our private security. And security is the biggest crew, thousands. I don't know how many thousands, but biggest crew. So anyway, they weren't going to pay for the sheriff to walk around, so they didn't like that. He said, well, if you're not going to enforce the laws, we're going to put up your property for forfeiture for not enforcing the laws. And so the fair goes, uh-oh, we do own it, and that is an asset. So to protect that asset and to deal with all the other stuff, they go, okay, we're going to go and declare this a drug and alcohol-free event. And so people were walking around. It was kind of strange because it was pretty free up until that point. You could sit down, puff a joint, whatever. But people now were walking around with peach shirts that said, obey the law, change the law. And they would go, excuse me, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to put that out, please. And if they got into an argument, it goes, well, again, don't jeopardize the fair. I'm asking you not to jeopardize the fair. And so they could usually work it out. And so that was the hard part. The easy part was keeping out alcohol. They did the line in the sand. You had to present your bag or your cooler or whatever. And no, can't bring any unknown beverage in. So if you want to buy some beverages, you can, but you can't bring in beer. And that had an immediate effect on the overall flavor of the fair. You didn't have drunken people. The second thing they did is there was no on-site ticket sales. So you had to have your ticket to get on the property. You had to have your ticket. So that cut down on all the people showing up just to party and hang out. If you don't have a ticket, you can't come in. And so between those two things, that did a lot to alleviate problems with the city of Anita. And we avoided getting our property seized. And things kind of gotten a little looser. It's not quite as tight as it was, but still there's no alcohol or drug use officially during public hours. So the rest I'm just going to show you some random pictures. There's a community village. This guy's Dahinda. He's an incredible person. There was 5 acres for sale way back in the 80s, and to get the fair to go through all the bureaucracy before somebody else could snap it up, Dahinda just said, I'll buy it, and I'll sell it back to the fair at cost. And he was just an incredible person. He started the Vegemanics. It's not Vegemaniacs, it's Vegetation and Erosion Control Management of vegetation and erosion control. So they're like, don't cut if necessary, tie back, keep enough room for the stilt walkers, leave vegetation in place, don't clear brush, we're just walk lightly on the land. At the bottom, Cindy Wooten, Bill Wooten, and Ken Kesey at the 20th year celebration, the 20th anniversary in 1989. Ken Kesey famously, being a prankster, at the end said, defy the sweep, defy the sweep, Anyway, they weren't too happy with Ken that day, but anyway, that's what happens with a prankster. We have our own newspaper, Fair Family News. This is an early 70s fair. Looks pretty laid back down home. People pretty normal, right? Not a lot of hippies. And then there's the Karamazovs juggling at a midnight show in the nude. Careful what you stick out there. Here's just some fair bureaucracy. This is the guidelines for everything, and it's getting bigger all the time. The Peach Pit is the newspaper at the fair that gives the entertainment and all kind of information about the fair. A little flyer, booth claim tags to claim your booth. There's Godzilla. It's one of the premier trucks. Buffalo, my friend Buffalo, has taken a personal love to Godzilla, and he's done all that metal scale work. The eyebrows lift up, the joint lights up. He had flames for a while. He's got all the little Godzillas. And you can just see his shoulder in there. Buffalo. They had a stage on it too, where they had a little music. I just want to hats off to recycling. They're definitely by far the hardest working crew. And they come out, set up all the kiosks. As soon as people show up, garbage starts showing up. And garbage breeds. If you put down a cup, next thing you know, there'll be another cup, and then there's a pile, and it gets bigger. So I always wanted to work recycling, but I do my gesture gig during the fair, and just it wouldn't work out because you have to get up at 5 and go do all the fair, do all the garbage in the fair, and do the sort. And then I want to just do the gesture thing. So I say, Robert Painter, I'll show up beforehand and work my tail off. I'll stay to the end and work my tail off, but just during fair. He goes, no, can't do it. I said, why not, Robert? Because everybody would want that deal. And, true democracy would not give me a special deal. But anyway, I did get to recycle with them up at Hornings a few times. Love recycling. And family is the worst. The public really tries, and they always kind of keep changing the system, but public really tries to sort everything out, and family sneaks out bags of mixed stuff after they've hoarded in their campsite all weekend. And then you see where the camping area is, huge piles of unstored stuff. But they came up, the goal in 2003 was for the fair to be waste-free. And I was a waste warrior for all 3 of the years leading up to that 2003. So we guarded a kiosk, and anybody that tried to come out and dump stuff, we go, I'll help you sort that out. And that guilt tripped them into, I'll deal with it. But I was, no, I'm here standing around. I'll be happy to help. All right, you can help. So anyway, it's one of the hardest working crews. Here's just a random, these are Cottage Grovers. Somebody heard about this and sent me images. These are my friends from Cottage Grove at one of the early 70s fair. And again, it looks just like normal people. Silverman, anybody ever run into Silverman? He was all silver, and he had a little pocket of silver, and you would see somebody walking by, and they would have a silver mark on him, because silver would just. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't there. I don't know what happened. So I want to give an incredible shout out for Susie Peransky that did these 2 books, Definitive History on the Country Fair. They have them. I don't know if they have them locally, but they have them at Tsunami, or you can order them through the Fair Family News. Incredible. As always, Deborah Monsiv helped me with lots of things. Eugene Weekly and Register Guard, a lot of those old photographs I stole from them. So they did a great timeline, 50 years. With the 50th anniversary, there was a lot of press. All the members of the Cottage Grove Historical Society who are here to help with trivia, which we'll start with very soon. And we'll be having a talk on the following Saturday, this coming Saturday. And don't forget about Genealogy Society. And do you have any questions?